All right, everybody, this is the No Set Path podcast. I'm your host, Drew English. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy the ride. Today's guest is writer and director Josh Caldwell. Josh made a name for himself with the release of his $6,000 feature Layover back in 2014. He shot it in LA entirely on a Canon 5D Mark II. He won an MTV Movie Award for that film, and it's been directly responsible for every big project he's done since, of which he's directed projects for Paramount Studios, Hulu, and his latest film, Mending the Line, which is on Netflix, stars the venerable Brian Cox of Succession fame. He's also recently released a course called 6K Filmmaker, where he takes students through how to make a full-length quality feature film on a budget. I really enjoyed this conversation. We talk a lot about the challenges of living a creative professional life and some philosophy behind that. So without further ado, here's my interview with Josh Caldwell. How long have you been in New York?
We lived here for 6 years now.
6 years.
So we made the move. I was in LA for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then made a move to here. My wife's from the area, so that's why we decided to come back here. And we did that in 2017. So we kind of beat the pandemic. And what's interesting was I moved away, and I knew a lot of people that were like, man, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I could move away. And then eventually a lot of them started doing it. And it was kind of like a direct result of me having done it. Like, I feel like I was maybe just that first person that went. And then suddenly all these people that I knew were like, oh, I'm moving away. And then the pandemic spurred that on. I mean, there's so many people that do not live in LA anymore.
Yeah.
And there's no real need anymore. I mean, after I moved away, because it was always a question of like, if you're not in LA, how does that impact your career? I talked to my manager. I said, what would you think if I moved to New York? And they were like, we don't care. Like, we rep people all over the world, you know? But the other thing is that I'm, as a filmmaker and as a director, like my life is not movies. And I've never really wanted my life to be movies, you know? And so in LA, it's movies. That's all there is.
Yeah.
You go into a movie theater and every single person around you is talking about, the short they're making or the script they're writing. And it's like, I go back and then I experience that and I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not here. And it's also a very tough place to be when LA can be a great place to be when you're like really young. New York is the same. When you're young, poor, struggling, you're not struggling, but you're at the beginning of what you're doing. And then it's a great place to be when you're really thriving. The middle area where you're sort of doing okay, but not really, like it can be a challenging environment to be in because like what I found was personally just being in LA, you are just constantly bombarded with other people's success. You drive down Sunset Boulevard, you see all the movies that are getting made and getting promoted that aren't yours. And, maybe you make a movie or you have a couple movies get made and they don't really catch. And it just feels like you're in this like weird thing. And because everything there is about movies, it's hard to not feel like you're lacking. One of the reasons we looked in the Hudson Valley was we really wanted to like move out. I wanted to be immersed in nature. Like I wanted nature on my doorstep. I wanted to like literally walk out my door and see trees and not see people. But I don't want to be like super isolated either. So like where we ended up is, and again, with the pandemic, it ended up being really nice because we're on 4 acres. We have like woods surrounding us. Each of our 3 neighbors, each of them have 30 acres.
Oh my God.
And then across the street from us is like a giant, I don't know if it's a county park or a town park, but it's like it's hundreds of acres.
Yeah.
And yet we're like 5 minutes from our little downtown area.
I mean,
so
that's kind of like the perfect scenario is like, you don't have to be in the place where when you're 22, you think you need to be.
I find that because I live with people who don't really care about the industry, they're not involved in the industry, it's just really refreshing to not have everything you do revolve around Hollywood.
Totally.
Know? And, like coaching Little League Baseball and coaching travel ball for my son and, all that kind of stuff is a lot of fun. It's a different like feeling. And being here got me into fly fishing, which became a big part of my life.
I was going to ask you if fly fishing came before or after
it came
Mend
after.
the Line.
Yeah. No, it came before.
Came
before, yeah.
Cool.
And that was just a random thing. That was, I'd always wanted to try it, and I'd always, I'd fished with my grandfather, but it was not fly fishing. It was like spin fishing. And I'd always wanted to try it. And I started looking it up and I just said, you know what, like, I noticed that we were like here at the, with the Catskills and all that kind of stuff. And I said, maybe I should try fly fishing. And so I ended up taking a 2-day Orvis class up at San Donona, and just fell in love with it. And just like, it became for me as a creative, and the reason why I connected in the very small way that I did with bending line and PTSD, and the way that, fly fishing can really help with that. In a small way, just as a creative, and this, like you spend so much of your day in your head.
Oh God.
And it's a very like sort of knowledge-based experience. I mean, so you spend all your day writing a script or shot listing or developing, and then you're working on set. But you don't really have a chance for like physical exertion. And I was missing that. Like I really wanted to like chop wood. Like that's a big, I was like, I want to have a house where we have to chop wood. And I wanted something that was going to sort of force me to go out, and something that was going to be sort of physical. And what I found in fly fishing was that it just really gets you out of your head, because in order to do it right, you really have to focus, and you really have to be present. And so it's a really nice sort of vacation from all of the sort of heady knowledge work that, we do as creatives.
Yeah, I find for me, it's like anything physical. So for me, because I'm not so much out in the woods because I'm right here, like basically uptown Kingston, but fixing stuff around the house, or like making like woodworking, making pieces of furniture, or whatever, anything that like forces me to like really focus down and almost get into like that meditative space. Yeah. Which I don't think that's unique. I think most creative people, most artistic people are like that, and they have to find those outlets to.
Right. You live in your head, and it's hard to get out of it. And I found myself going, God, it'd be great to like, let's get out of it. Let's take a week and go, when I was in LA, I'd say like, let's take a week and go up to, Big Bear and rent a cabin. Yeah. And then I just started going like, why do that? Like, why not have the cabin be where I live all the time?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and that's kind of what we turned it into.
Yeah. I mean, LA has, when you drive out of LA, I think you have a more diverse landscape, but New York is the same. It's like you drive for 2 hours and you're basically still in the city.
Yeah.
Any direction you go, and everything kind of looks the same. So it's nice to have a little more access to like fresh air and trees,
Well, I think too that, like in a city like New York, or a city like LA, and I imagine this to be true of like, Miami or like Chicago or something like that. It just never stops.
No.
Like it's always on. And there's an energy there. I went to school in New York. I went to Fordham University.
Oh, okay, sure.
And so I had 4 years of that experience. And what I would find is you get your body sort of attunes to the rhythm of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an energy there that kind of moves through you, and you get, clipped into that you don't really notice. And then I'd go home to Seattle, for either Christmas break or in the summers, and there'd be just this like big release. And I was just like, whoa, like, what is that?
It's an interesting transition, but it's a welcome one. And I find that now when I do the reverse, because I'm in the city a lot for work, like I have to go tomorrow and do a shoot. And I find that now when I go in, I very quickly like kind of hit my limit of like, okay, I'm good. What did you go to Fordham for?
I just studied, just Bachelor of Arts, like just a basic, undergrad.
Yeah.
I applied to Fordham randomly. Like I didn't even apply to NYU because I didn't want to write another essay.
Yeah.
But I applied to Fordham randomly through my like college counselor's like advisement. And then, I got in, and I'd been making a lot of things in high school.
Yeah.
And so I just said to myself, do I want to go down to Orange County, California, and have everything about my life be filmmaking? Or I believe this still, and I believed it at the time, that as a director and as a writer, to learn how to be a director and a writer, you can be taught that very quickly. Like sure. the sort of technical aspect of directing.
Yeah, the mechanics are what they are. Yeah.
But that so much of writing and directing is just based on experience.
100%.
And so I thought, you know what? Like I grew up in Seattle, never been to New York. Like, let's take a shot. Like, let's go live in New York City and get that experience. Because I always figured I would end up in LA. And just the idea of living right in the middle of like on the Upper West Side and getting thrust into that environment was just really cool and exciting and different. And so I said, let's do it. And it was just such a big change of pace and such a cool like learning experience and a place to live and met like a lot of great people. and Fordham had like a really fantastic, and so I said, it's not a film program, but what I'll do is I'll just make movies. Like I'll just keep making movies on the side because obviously film is being done in New York. And what I didn't know at the time, and I soon learned, is that Fordham had, to my benefit, Fordham had a really fantastic acting, and still has a very fantastic acting program. And so I got to take advantage of the fact that all these young actors that, were basically, that I could use in film and meet and connect with. And so like for example, Taylor Schilling was in my class and, from Orange is the New Black,
totally.
and she's great. And then like Michaela McManus, was another actress that I actually made a short film with. The cool thing about Fordham is I'll just go make like these $1,000 shorts. I'll just come up, I'll write the short and I'll come up with it and I'll just go shoot it. And I did that, throughout college. And then one of those shorts that I made with Michaela was called The Beautiful Lie. And it ended up like literally my senior year. I submitted got nominated and won an MTV Movie Award for this like best film on campus category. And, and 2 days after graduating college, I was down in Santa Monica, down in Culver City on stage at the MTV Movie Awards, getting handed a golden popcorn by Zach Braff and giving a speech.
Super cool, man.
And, I thought the like keys to Hollywood were going to be like complete, like the door was going to be open for me at that point. And it was it was not that.
We've all had moments like that.
I mean, but you sort of go, at the time you go, oh, like this is a big thing, right? And I knew like MTV Movie Awards, like who really cares, right? Nobody's like, suddenly the people that win Best Kiss aren't getting offered like, their next film. But I just thought for the fact that like a student had gotten it, would have been more meaningful. So I ended up getting some calls from like managers and things like that. But when they announced all the winners, they left my category off. So like I was never announced in the trades, and nobody watches the show.
Yeah, sure.
So I was just like so bummed, and it was a little struggle after that for a while because I just thought this should have a little bit more meaning than it did. And eventually I came to terms with the fact that like, all right, if I'm gonna like have a career in Hollywood, it's gonna be because of me. It's not going to be because anybody else is going to see something I did and just come to me. I'm like, I've got to do that work. So I took the movie award and I put it under my bed and I got to work and I started hustling. So it was a really great lesson early on.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, because how old were you when you won that?
I mean, I was 22.
Yeah. So at 22, it's a weird dichotomy because you think you know everything.
Right. You also think like, oh, they're going to give me a $50 million movie at 22.
Exactly, which clearly doesn't happen. But now,
clearly a wonderkin, like,
sure,
P.T. Anderson.
But we all have moments like that. And I started life as a musician. So for me, it was, when we started selling out clubs and got managers interested and things like that. And you're like, oh, this is it. This is the moment. And then obviously none of the big aspirations or dreams happen, but you get a little bit of validation, right? And you get a little bit of a confidence boost. Yeah. So now down the line, at least you can say, sure, the doors didn't open, but it's like you were on some sort of track, some sort of path.
Yeah, yeah.
And so was it always filmmaking for you?
Yeah.
It's always been
from the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, from the point when it was like actually thinking about what I wanted to do.
Sure.
You're
one of the rare ones because a lot of people don't know what they want to do so early on.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I knew in maybe middle school that I wanted to make movies.
Yeah.
And was fortunate that like my high school had ways of doing that. There was just a lot of opportunity along the way. And in a way in which like I just found myself saying like, no, this is like what I want to do. And there really has never been anything else.
Yeah.
So I got to make it happen.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of research. Nothing crazy leading up to this. So Layover kind of came on the other side of you doing a bunch of shorts.
Yeah.
Like into the decent 5-figure range.
Yeah.
And not really getting maybe the momentum off of those that you wanted. But what's interesting and what I want to talk about is what went on inside where you were like, okay, I haven't gotten to where I thought I would be or where I want to be, sinking like $40, $50, $70,000 in on a short.
Yeah.
Was it like a desperation thing or a like, hey, fuck it, let's just see what happens if I grab a 5D and a little bit of money that I can scrounge together. Because it was $6,000, right?
6,000, yeah.
Yeah. And make a feature film. And that obviously went on to like really catapult you into like next stages. So like what was going on behind the scenes with Layover?
So, I mean, I had wanted to make a feature. I'd been trying to make a feature. By make a feature, I meant like write something that we could get funded and made probably since college. Like in college, the fact that I had not made a feature felt behind. And at the time I was working for Anthony Zeiger, created CSI. And so I had a lot of access to like things. So I was shooting and playing around a lot with the Canon 5D.
Yep.
So I was seeing what was possible in these kind of like just taking it out on the streets and seeing what you can see and how little light you need to shoot a movie or to shoot something. And then the other thing was Ed Burns started coming out and talking a lot about all these $10,000 features he was making.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could probably get $10,000. And, you know, if we shot on a 5D, we could probably make this happen. And I'd been doing a couple things for Anthony where we shot on the 5D and we were doing narrative and we were just using very few lights and really simple stuff. And I was just like, I think there's a way to make this work. And in my head, I just had this idea of this woman who's stuck on a layover. I didn't know what the story was. I didn't know what kind of movie it was going to be. But I just thought maybe that's a good sort of, sort of a backbone for this kind of approach. And I just was feeling like I've got to do something. Like, I don't think I really want to keep doing shorts because I don't think there's value in that. And I still to this day don't think there's value in that past a certain point for a filmmaker. But, and so I just sat down and wrote this story. And I wrote the script very quickly. And, borrowed a lot from sort of like French New Wave, but kind of had this approach that I ended up sort of referring to as modular storytelling where, so many writers, when you're writing scripts and it's not wrong to do this, but they focus on the details. They focus on like the description of the location and the house and because you're just inventing it all.
Right.
But I knew I was never going to be able to do that. I was going to have to use what was there. So I just wrote house.
Right.
Like, and so, but that allowed me, I tried to create a script where there was flexibility because I had situations where like, for example, there's a party scene in Layover. What I never did was set that up within the context of the script as some kind of rager party.
Right.
In fact, it's referred in the script as kind of a weird gathering, So that gave me the flexibility because I'm not going to pay extra.
Sure.
That gave me the flexibility of being able to make it work whether I had 10 people or whether I had 30 people. And so I tried to create a situation where the story could exist as the story regardless of the sort of context in which we ended up shooting it. Layover was me coming from a place of, no, I wouldn't say desperation, but getting there.
Yeah.
This feeling like I'm doing the thing everybody tells me to do. I'm making very high-end shorts. It's not turning into anything. I think I've got to make a feature. And lo and behold, I make this $6,000 feature that has no stars in it, that is entirely in French and is very, very indie. And it's the thing that led to every single feature directing job I've had since.
For the record, I'm in my 40s and I haven't even made a short, let alone a feature.
That's all right.
So,
I mean, you know what? Ridley Scott, he was 40 when he made
his
first movie. So.
But it's what you're describing is kind of like to really reach for an analogy here is the idea of like, if you're single and you're looking for a relationship, it's never going to happen. And it's when you stop looking that what you really need comes your way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in effect the same thing. It's like when
you're like trying really hard.
Yeah, when you stop trying so hard and you're just like, okay, what can I do? Like what's within my means to achieve? What came off of Layover? Just like list off some things, some opportunities that happen.
I mean, and a lot of the groundwork had been laid, so it wasn't, because it didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, I spent 3 years working for the guy that created like the biggest show on television, the biggest franchise in television, and met like a lot of people. I mean, I was sitting in on meetings with The Rock, and I was sitting in meetings with, with the high level agents at CAA, and getting to partake in all this stuff and working with like really cool people. I got to do, as part of that job, I got to produce a short that was directed by Rob Legato, who's the 2-time Oscar winner for visual effects, who handled like Titanic experiences and groundwork that got laid. Making that. And I had done work on one of Anthony's project called Cybergeddon, which was like this sort of digital web series. But one of the producers of that was this guy named Bill O'Dowd with a company called Dolphin Entertainment. And he, without me even showing it to him, had heard about Layover. He knew me, so he watched it and was so impressed by what I was able to do that he had me pitch on and eventually hired me to direct the full season of this series that he was putting together called South Beach.
Oh, the Hulu series.
The Hulu series, yeah. So then I went down to Miami to do that. And then I came back, and then like that fall, I got offered my second feature. It's a movie called Be Somebody, which came out of them seeing Layover, and again, I had to pitch on it. It just wasn't handed to me, but like, they'd seen that movie and saw what I could do, and then I could direct performance.
Yeah, you have a little bit of a snowball momentum behind you.
And so I pitched on it, and they went with me, and then, but I was so frustrated by those two experiences. I was frustrated by and it was really like the production setup of like South Beach and Be Somebody. South Beach was shot in 15 days, 2 hours of content, 6 20-minute episodes. 15 days, it was a 150-page script. And, I think it kind of shows. And I was reacting to that because the way I did Layover was, again, we only shot Layover in like 11 days, but we were shooting for 7 of the 8 hours. Like we were rolling and shooting because I would put up 2 lights and then I'd be doing 15, 16 takes, like, per angle because we just had time.
Yeah, sure.
Because we created that, right? On these other bigger things, as people know, you come in, it's like, oh, you got 2 hours of load in and set up, and you're not rolling until 3 hours in. Negative was me trying to get back to a Layover approach, but do something in genre, in thriller. But I was like, I want to go back to making it how we made Layover. So, but I had at this point, because of Layover, befriended an exec over at Mar Vista who really liked my stuff. I'd pitched on some movies and got very close to doing something else with them. But I came in and said, hey, I want $100,000 and I want you to leave me alone and I'll come back to you with a film. And they were actually like, all right, like that's
Cool.
so little, that's
Great.
fine. And so that's how we did. And so like Negative, we shot for like 37 days.
Yeah.
Over the course of several months. And so that came directly out of it. I mean, Negative was a huge thing to show, hey, I can do action on budget and do really good action, I could direct performance, I can take people who are not actors. So like in Be Somebody, Matt Espinosa is like he's not an actor, he's a Vine star. And I had to kind of craft a performance for him, utilize it. And so, there's always stuff to be gained from it. But I mean, as a direct result, I could trace my last 5 films back to Layover.
That's so wild. And then, you touched on Infamous and Mending the Line. And, at least from what I've seen, those have been like reasonably successful for you.
Yeah, they've done. Yeah. I mean, I think that like what's interesting is there's sort of a public success, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like success with indie industry.
Yeah,
and
course.
often like just getting a film made is seen as success.
It's something, yeah.
And and getting cast and like doing something interesting and different. It's all building currency. And so for a director, currency is like cast, right? Because that's what you need to make a movie. You need money, but you get money through cast.
How did Brian Cox happen? Because it seems to happen like right during the whole like Succession ramp up or somewhere around that. So he was, he's been around forever.
He was in between seasons.
Okay.
And we made him an offer. I mean, that's literally like nothing special. We didn't go to his hairdresser. We didn't chase him down. We made him an offer and he accepted. But yeah, I mean, then that was something that actually the agency came to us with that idea.
That's cool.
They were like, hey, what about Brian?
Well, that's cool because, so to your point about like public versus private, for lack of a better term, it's like the public success versus the industry success or the behind the scenes success. I'm curious how you, as a filmmaker and as a creative in general, how are you measuring success for yourself? Because for me, and I've said this a million times on this show, it's like I always use myself as a proxy because really I started this to just like be like little therapy sessions for myself. And then by effect, like hopefully somebody else is going through the same thing. But it's like, how are you measuring success of a project or of your career so far? Like, what are the touch points for you that mean something?
Yeah. Well, the big lesson I learned from doing South Beach. So South Beach was, again, when I came onto it, it was like, okay, it's on Hulu. So it's got distribution. It had this whole like sort of branded advertising campaign behind it. And then what happened was, so I throw myself into this, I make the stuff and then it comes out and literally it was like crickets. I mean, nobody saw it. Nobody reviewed it, right? Like Hulu was pushing all of their originals, which this wasn't a part of. But beyond that, beyond the fact that like it was just like this big black hole, I was also really unhappy with the work that I did on it.
Yeah.
Like I was not happy with what I did. I come out of this project, I'm very depressed. I'm in a black hole. It's not like, nobody's calling me to say like, hey, we want to offer you the next thing. And I started a real journey that I'm still on, trying to come to terms with this. And a big part of that was finding stoicism and the writings of Ryan Holiday. He wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, which, in many ways has become sort of a Bible to me, and he's got all these other books that, I love, but the idea of stoicism, which is like, what is up to us, what is not up to us, what is within our control and what is not within our control. And I realized that, in addition to a bunch of other stuff I've learned over the years, I just was like, I have to go into every project doing the best work that I can. And I need to make sure that what I'm protective of is that I'm happy with that work. It's more like I just need to be satisfied with the work that I'm doing, because I'm not going to control how it does. But if I'm happy with the work that I've done, then that's all I need. It's still when something doesn't hit or when you don't get a good review, like it very much, I'm still in that place where I'm like, I'm not yet at a point in my career where I can really say, well, I don't really care.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the point. Like, I don't think it's the point of like, I think in some way, and I think, at least for myself, I think in some way, stuff like that would always impact me. It's just the level to which it impacts you. Because, whenever, and this is advice that I should be taking for myself, but it's like whenever you put your happiness or your success in the hands of other people, you're always going to be disappointed.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Always.
And one of the struggles that I've had, just being open about it, one of the struggles I've had is that the last two movies I've did, which is Infamous and Mending the Line, which are my most significant so far in terms of budget, in terms of the people in them, have both happened and released in incredibly turbulent, trying times.
Yeah.
I made Infamous in 2019. It came out in summer of 2020.
Oh, great.
Not only in the summer of pandemic, but literally it came out in the week of all of the George Floyd protests.
Oh boy.
And we have a movie about two white kids driving around killing cops and shooting guns. Not
ideal.
I had no control over that. We actually we asked them to push it and they didn't. But and so the mood of the country at the time was not, so I wrote it sort of in the midst of like Trump and this idea of like celebrity getting away with all this stuff. Like, in a lot of ways, there's like an angry sort of thing to it. That's what I wrote in the midst of. And then it comes out, and it was no longer satire.
Right.
In a way. It was too close.
Yeah.
And, that comes out at a different time. People's sort of mental place is different. Like, they get it. I don't know. So that happens. And then then we're in the pandemic and nobody's making anything.
Yep.
And then finally stuff starts to open up. I get Mending the Line. I go shoot Mending the Line. We shoot it in the middle of the pandemic. It sort of gets processed for, we do post and everything over the course of a year. It comes out in June of this year, June of 2023, right in the middle of a writer and actor strike when Hollywood is not doing anything and paying attention to anything. So the struggle for me has been turning these projects, getting a momentum going.
Yeah.
And turning these projects, I describe to people, it feels like I'm pushing a boulder up the hill.
Yeah.
And every movie, I should be able to rest that boulder at some point.
No, man, you're Sisyphus. You just got to keep pushing.
And then you keep going.
Yeah.
But at least I've got that momentum going.
Right.
What I feel is happening is I'm pushing it up the hill and I get to that rest point and it's rolling back down. And what some people don't realize is just how just the industry, the world is going through so much turmoil.
Sure.
And so it's really challenging times. It's challenging to release stuff theatrically. We put Mending the Line out in theaters and it really didn't do well, but neither did The Flash. But that is challenging as a creative to sort of be like, okay, every project is starting over.
Yeah.
The way I've the way I've attempted to start shifting my thinking, because I'm sure the way I've been thinking about it is not helping, is, and somebody was telling me about it, and he was telling me about it in a way that was unrelated to what we were talking about. But then it clicked with me when he was describing how he and his son his son is, just got out of college and he wants to become a veterinarian.
Sure.
And he was saying like, oh, it should be easier. It should be like, it's like stepping into something, right? And my buddy was saying, the way I kind of described it was, oh, we're going, there's a mountain they like to hike, and they hike to the top of that mountain. They always get to this point where it's a false summit,
Yeah.
And so I've tried to start thinking about what I've been dealing with, because it's not like I have no momentum.
Sure.
It's not like there's nothing there, but instead of the boulder rolling back down, it's rolling forward, but it's rolling down.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, is this you roll it up and then it comes down, but you're still higher than you were at the beginning here.
Mhm.
But yeah, you still got to get behind that boulder and keep pushing it up.
Yeah.
And that to me clicked at that time and has allowed me to say, okay, like all this is building into something, but yeah, there's going to be valleys, and it may require you exerting all that force to get that boulder going again, but you're not starting from where you were.
Yeah. I like where we're getting to.
Yeah.
I like where we're getting to. Like, I think this is a helpful message for people to hear.
Yeah.
Because from the outside looking in, again, I say it all the time, but it's like the mask of success is just that. It's a mask. And like what really matters is when you dig underneath it and you see any number of struggles that people are going through,
Right.
but it's how you deal with those struggles. What got you through that kind of period where it's like, where you have something of notoriety and that spins you right into like, oh, streamers and networks and blah, blah, blah. Like this is cool stuff. And then when the things that you want don't come to fruition, what gets you through that gap between disappointment and then getting back on the horse with like Infamous and Mending the Line and things like that?
Well, like the nice thing is that nobody sees this stuff. So
Sure.
it's not like the big director jail, like
Right.
where you've had a big movie come out and now it's failed and everybody knows
Right.
it and you're in jail. So like I've kind of looked at it as I've been able to fail
Sure.
without anybody knowing.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Failure is hard and people don't like to talk about it, and it's not easy, and it's not easy to have it on your record. And one of the big challenges with filmmaking is that that I've always run into is unlike, in a typical business setting, where you do a project, it doesn't work or it doesn't go anywhere. Like it's not really your name. Like, but in filmmaking, if you're a director, like you're carrying that filmography along with you.
Yeah.
And that informs how you decide stuff. Like having that on my filmography, having my name associated, like I'm overly protective of that in ways that I probably don't need to be. But I was also like, I just need to make sure that I'm not stepping into a situation that is not going to be good and not going to be conducive to getting me the next thing, And sometimes that means waiting. And sometimes that means saying no. I mean, Ryan Holiday talks a lot about that idea of like, once you start saying no, you get a lot of the clutter and a lot of the stuff out of the way.
Yeah. I've never read any of his stuff. He's like, his name keeps coming across my desk as someone I should probably read at some point. You're the first person who's directly.
I highly recommend The Obstacle is the Way. Like, it's a great book. But the notion that we so often encounter obstacles in our lives and we think, oh, this obstacle shouldn't be here. This is not the correct path. But instead, that obstacle is the path. Like, the obstacle is the way. And it's through overcoming those obstacles that you become better, that you become smarter, that you become more in tune with what you want in life, with the sort of stoicism aspect, the idea of like whatever is. There's a lot of comfort there. It makes it really easy to sort of help process stuff and help deal with failure and deal with things that are not comfortable and not good, and overcome them so you don't get sort of, bogged down by them.
Yeah,
and you get
I
stuck.
love that. Pretty sure that's going to be the title of the episode. The Obstacle is the Way.
There you go.
Pretty sure, yeah.
With credit to Ryan Holiday.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself from feeling swamped or bogged down by the quiet stuff, by the pay the bills kind of jobs?
Yeah.
How do you keep those projects at bay from like being the tidal wave that just kind of consumes your creative energy and your time, really?
Yeah. I mean, well, part of it is that I don't have to do them every day.
Sure.
Because you sort of take what I get paid on the movies and you combine it with then like, there's enough there that like I'm not required to full-time sort of pick up work. Although there are times when I'm like, even during the summer, I wish I had more of it, because I was just like, all right, like I'd like to stay busier than I am. But I think that it's just important to figure out how do you work best
Yeah.
Like what sort of setup is best for you in terms of development? And so for, a big thing I do is I get up early.
Yeah.
I'm up usually at 5 a.m. and I'll either get a start on, if I'm editing, sometimes I'll start it on that. If I'm developing, I try and carve out, what I usually try and do is, unless I'm on a deadline with something, I try and carve out a couple hours of the morning for like development work. I'm writing the script, or I'm working on this project, or even right now I'm prepping a film that hopefully will start shooting in the first quarter of next year.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing a lot of like my script breakdown and my analysis work and like deep diving into that. And I've got to carve out time where I turn off the phone and I turn off the email and I just do that. And that's really been hard for me lately, because I've been having to get back into it, because so much of like the last several months have been not that, and so, but it is really just about keeping that as a priority and trying to make sure that like you do have that time. I find that like the best thing for me creatively is the morning.
Yeah.
Because by the afternoon, my brain's fried,
Totally.
but I can still edit and stuff. And I was talking to another filmmaker friend of mine who was sort of lamenting that he was going to have to like kind of probably go get a job and go back to this agency work that he didn't want to do. And I just said, listen, man, like sometimes you just got to do what's best for your family.
Yeah.
And that might mean that you got to hang up the creative stuff for a little while.
Yeah.
You got to go do regular work. It's not a failure.
No.
Even though it feels like it.
So this is a good segue into the course, into 6K Filmmaker. Not that you need a whole other thing to put on your shoulders.
Right.
But what was the impetus for making a course?
Well, I think that part of it was trying to find something that, I could put out there that I could do once.
Yeah.
And then, and have, income from it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, because that's one of the things about like being a filmmaker is like, in between feature films, you can't like just go get full-time jobs. It's not like that. It doesn't work that way. Like, because as soon as that next film comes around, you're like, well, I got to quit. So I'm out,
Yeah.
So you have to sort of, like you were saying, you have to patchwork these small things,
Totally.
Here and there. And the course was intriguing to me because, again, I was seeing people putting out courses that I knew were not directors. And my wife was saying, you should create a course. Like, you should make a course. And I was just like, what am I going to make a course about? Like, I don't know, like directing.
Yeah.
Like, that's stupid. But I was thinking about it because I was like, well, if there's an angle, maybe there's an angle. And I just realized, what we did on Layover is pretty unique. And nobody else, people have done it, but nobody's teaching a course about it. And one of the things is that everything you're taught from film school to later is that you need money, and you need a lot of money. And it's a very expensive endeavor, and not everybody has access to it. So their dreams get stopped short because they're like, well, there's no other way to do it. And I thought, hey, I did it. And not only did I do it, I launched my career with it.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I wrote a whole article on it that caused a lot of controversy, but it was like, I think that at a certain point for a filmmaker, making short films is a complete waste of your time and money. And because I think that early on, they can be great for education, for developing your style, for figuring out what speaks to you as a filmmaker. But if you then get to the point where like, I'm going to continue to make shorts to then launch my career as a director, I think that, and you're spending a lot of money to do it, I think that's the mistake. It's a bit of a clickbait headline for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you. It's like, they're good to a point.
Right.
And then once you hit that point, it's like, nobody's going to hand over a multi-million-dollar feature project to you because you had a dope 10-minute short.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you make a feature, even if you don't get it at Sundance, doesn't turn into anything, you can still sell it. You may not make a lot of money, but it's still something that you can put out there. You can pay to put it up on iTunes. You can pay to put it up on Amazon, and you can sell it as a project and potentially make a little bit of money back if you're smart about how you release it and how you market it. So, it just carries, it's got more value than shorts. But, I just thought that, hey, I think there's something to be said here. And one of the big components of it that I talked a lot about in the course that people really gravitate towards is this notion of like live environment filmmaking.
Yeah.
Live environment filmmaking is basically, it's like shooting. It's the way that Sean Baker made Tangerine. Like, you are stepping into scenarios where you do not control anything around you. So that's how we made Layover. I mean, I shot Layover on planes and airports and hotels, and we didn't control it. We're stealing it.
Yeah.
But it's not just stealing the shot. It's like, we were doing scenes, like, and it's just being smart about how you sort of utilize these different techniques to make your story feel way, way bigger than your budget. And I mean, the whole chase scene, the whole sort of like pursuit scene at the beginning of Negative was all shot completely without permits on the fly.
Right.
And so, but it's just stuff that's not taught and it's not intuitive. And by the way, I've not only used these in my $6,000 movie, I've used it in the $100,000 movie, I've used it in the $1 million movies. It's going to help you make you better as a director. And it's going to improve your skills as a director. Like, I think it's cool to see people taking sort of this and also just the excitement, you know, and seeing like so many people are saying, wow, I just never thought of this. I never really thought this could work. And now they're seeing it work, and they're seeing it work in like a big way.
A lot of people are just exposed to like, it's this one way of doing things. Like, to a point, at least in my experience, the film industry has always presented this front of like, oh, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the correct way to do it.
There's the correct way to do it. And it's always been this way, and this is how you're going to do it, and blah, 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 blah.
We run ads and, all that stuff, but we get a lot of pushback and criticism from people who are like, oh, I guess you're not so many people like, oh, I guess you're not paying your crew. Right. Oh, you're not paying your crew. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. They're always DPs.
Of course.
Always below the line. DPs, sound guys. And, it's interesting because I always go like, well, what makes you think we even have a crew?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And it's interesting because you get this like pushback from people who are like, this is impossible. You can't do it. And I'm like, well, Chris Nolan did it with Following. He made that for $6,000. Shane Carruth made Primer for $7,000 one Sunday. Because you get all these arguments. People are like, you can't make a good film for $6,000. And I said, well, obviously good is like,
well, that's all relative.
That's
like,
all relative.
That's subjective.
But I'm like, but Chris Nolan did Following for $6,000. That's part of the Criterion Collection. Shane Carruth did Primer, that won Sundance. The Polish brothers made For Lovers Only for less than $10,000. That made $500,000, on iTunes.
What's interesting, having not seen the course, but just the way you're describing it, is you're giving people a tool set.
Yep.
And people have to be able to take that tool set and do with it what they will. And like some people, when I was digging around doing some research, maybe it was even one of the videos that's on the course page.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but it's essentially like anybody can make a movie. Maybe it's not going to be good. Maybe they're not going to be a good filmmaker, but anybody can do it.
Right. And that's really the difference, right? And that's fine. And by the way, people are going to make not great movies. I mean, Robert Rodriguez always said, everybody's got bad movies in them.
Sure.
Get them out of the way when there's nothing on the line, and they're very cheap,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the perspective. I also think that like often they're just, people have stories to get out and stories that they want to tell, and they're always run up against the wall of financing, and especially now in Hollywood, those more interesting stories are not getting made, even by well-known filmmakers.
Yeah.
The challenge of like, Oppenheimer doesn't get made if it's not Chris Nolan off the back of every movie he's made and the billions he's made at the box office.
Of course.
Like, it just isn't happening. And I think that's frustrating because I think that there's a lot of stories to tell. There's some interesting stories to tell that deserve to be made. And it might mean that if it means showing somebody how to do it for $10,000 and they go and do it, and that's just a story that exists versus like never getting made, I think existing is the better option.
What do you see are some of the like more common hangups for, it could be directors, it could be creatives in general, that like stop them from just doing the thing that they say they want to do? And my example is like, I've wanted to dip my toes into narrative. I haven't done it.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't tell you why, other than I come up with excuses all the time.
Mm-hmm.
This, that, and the other thing. Are there any like common threads that you see with people?
I think it's, a big thing is always the equipment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, do I have a good enough camera?
Yeah.
Do I need an 8K camera? Do I need like a RED? And that's a big thing, which I always say, like, I think if it means doing it on your iPhone, do it on your iPhone.
Yeah, man.
The other thing is access to cast, often. And I say, so I've given examples of like how I used to do it when I was doing short films using like Actors Access or Breakdown Express, and like finding some really awesome people on there, and because they're always like, well, how do I find actors? And especially what I run into is there are a lot of people who live not in LA and not in New York.
Yeah.
I think that the one thing that I've always said too, because the challenge, and you tell me, but like one of the things for directors is if you are not also a writer, what are you shooting?
Right.
One of the suggestions that I remember Were you ever on like do you remember how IMDb used to have these like message boards?
No.
So IMDb, I mean, 15, 20 years ago.
It has to be ages ago.
Yeah, had these message boards.
Oh, no.
And there was one message board on like filmmaking.
Okay.
And I remember there was always a question about how do I get started as a director? How do I get doing stuff? And one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard was go get a one-act play. Go find a one-act play, like The Zoo or something, or Waiting for Godot, like whatever it is. Find like a good 10 to 20 page play, adapt it, like just put it in a script form, and go and shoot it and go make it. And know that you can never put it out, you can never release it, but that's fine. Because especially if you're at an early age and you're just learning, the biggest impediment that people have, the biggest thing getting in their way is what is the material that I'm shooting? So warm up and get practice by just take the material that's out there, use these one-act plays that exist, figure out how you're going to adapt this and go shoot it, and work with actors, get some actors to come out for a day and go shoot the thing, and then go home and edit it. And doing that, if you get the material out of the way and you let the material exist, because you still got to do all the same work. You got to do your script analysis, you got to do your shot listing, you got to figure out what this is about, you got to figure out how you're directing actors. Everything is done the same way. You're just using material that you don't own and can't do anything with, but like, who cares? It's supposed to be practice.
Right on. What's next in the works for you? Anything you can share?
I do have a project that we had the interim agreement.
Yep.
And so we're out to cast right now. Hopefully, again, I mentioned shooting that in like Q1. I have another project that I just had a call about that we were out to cast like right before the strike. And that is maybe a Q2, Q3 thing next year. I would like to start getting like 2 movies a year if I can, and just like start doing, because I'm operating these kind of indie under 5 worlds where they're very fast, they're 20-day shoots, but there's a lot of money in there, and a lot of budgets. A lot of people looking to make money, so they're putting money into it, and they're fulfilling sort of a role that like studios have stopped completely, and even the streamers have stopped. And I've got, what I'm trying to always do is, in development is always sort of think in tiers. So I've got like these kind of more projects that can be done in the, 2 to 5 range that I'm working on trying to get going now. And then I've got a couple that kind of exist in maybe like the 6 to 8, and then I'm thinking like long-term, because it's like, you got to develop this stuff out. You got to write it. Then I'm thinking like, okay, I've got the 20 to 25. So I'm always sort of working in stages and trying to think of things that can work in various things so that, because these ones like the 6 to 8 and the 20 to 25 are always going to take so much longer to put together than the 1 to 2s or the 2 to 5s. And so that's the thing I think also that separates me a little bit from a lot of other peers. Not to say nobody else is doing this, but this is what I've been told, is that I'm kind of constantly searching and trying to find material. Like I'm always looking for scripts. I'm always developing my own scripts. I'm always trying to find writers to work with. I'm always writing myself. And so I think by constantly creating a sort of a faucet of ideas and a faucet of material, because until you have the material, you can't do anything, as we just talked about.
Yeah, for sure. Always turning behind the scenes, man.
I know. Well, you have to be. And it also keeps you busy, and that's what keeps you sort of like feeling like you're moving forward in your career and you're engaged. And the thing that I also come back to is, you get to a place where you feel like, you come out of something and you're like depressed about how it did, or you're not feeling good about what it did, or you're feeling like it's a failure and stuff like that. What I have found that works for me is the only solution I know to that is to take action. It's the only action. That's the only thing I know. So like if I'm feeling down or I'm feeling like, nothing's happening or whatever, the only thing I know to do that makes me feel better is to start taking action. What does that mean? That means either calling my manager, that means going back through all my old ideas, that means reaching out to the producer saying, hey, what's going on? Or starting to write, And that I think is always going to be something that people can do, that can kind of counteract the natural ebbs and flows of this industry, and the ways in which this industry operates in a very strange way, because it'll be like nothing, and then all of a sudden, boom. Like
you actually answered a question that I was going to ask, which is advice for creatives, but you kind of answered it already. Just take action. I mean, take action. That can be out of context from filmmakers, like just anybody.
I mean, the other thing that's great, especially if you're a writer, is that scripts never die.
Right.
So you may write something and you may send it out and it might not work, but that's because of where you are in your, where you are in your career. You get to a place, because I remember hearing this story, my manager told me this. He was always like, man, look at like Judd Apatow. He's like, Judd Apatow, before he was Judd Apatow, was just, he had so many scripts. He was writing scripts and like, nothing would happen. And then like literally the second he like blew up, everybody was calling, and those are all the scripts that he ended up making.
Yeah, man.
And there was like an exec, I heard a story where this exec was like, hey, or what's going on with this? And Judd's like, well, you read it and you passed on it. And the exec's like, no, I didn't. I don't think I read it. Send it to me again, right? And it's like that kind of thing. And so the work you're doing now, even though those scripts may not be selling, even though those scripts may not be, yet converting into a career, those scripts never really die. And I think that's why it's also important when you're writing to not be writing the thing that you're trying to chase the market with, or you're writing because you're trying to make a cash grab, or you're just trying to get a sale, because you're not going to care about those things. But if you're writing those things that are like important to you, that are telling stories that you care about, those will always live with you. And then once you're in that position, you can go, great, let's go get this made.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, if you're chasing a market or trying to make money, by the time, even if you can get it made or get it created, whatever, by the time it's taking off, like the market has shifted. So I agree.
I don't even really know
guns.
if that's true. It's not that it's not true. I just don't know if there really is a market anymore. I don't know what the market is for scripts nowadays.
I have no
think
idea.
that like, unfortunately, I think so many of the people I know who have quit, they were all writers.
Yeah.
And they all wanted to be feature writers because they just like that, trying to make it as a feature film writer these days, I think is so challenging. I don't know how to tell people to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
like I don't
crazy.
really, because even as an actor, so many of the people, there's a lot of people in my course who are actors who are also now writing and directing.
Oh, cool.
And I think what's interesting as an actor, right, about that is you get to create the roles that you want to be known for and that you want to play.
Yeah.
And I think that's way better than waiting around for somebody else to hand it to you, because then they're the ones who are going to pigeonhole you into a type, right? But so like one of the things that, I, as a filmmaker, one of the things I constantly think about, especially with low budget stuff, is like, can I go to somebody who is not getting this type of role, right? So like one of the things when I did Negative with Simon Quarterman and Katya Winter. And they were attached to another project that I was attached to, so I got to know them. And that project ended up not going anywhere. But I said, hey, would you guys do you want, like, and we were all frustrated by it not going anywhere. So I said, would you guys ever do like a $100,000 movie? Would you just like to go make a movie? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. Because one of the things I came to Katya with was I said, and she at the time had just gotten done with like Sleepy Hollow. She had done a lot of like corset stuff and stuff she did not want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I came to her with like, hey, do you want to play like a badass, like MI6 operative, who's going to fight and shoot guns and like wear normal contemporary clothes? And she was like, yes, absolutely.
Sold. Yeah.
And so even though it was like, she was not getting paid anything, I mean, we barely paid anybody anything on that. And yet when that movie got done, her team was able to take, not the whole movie, but some of those clips or fight scenes and her with the gun and use that to get her. Then she started getting all these great jobs. She played like an Interpol agent on Blood and Treasure.
That's awesome.
She was like in The Boy. Like, I'm not saying that was directly caused by that, but it allowed, she was willing to do it because now she got to kind of create the role, right? I wasn't coming to her saying, hey, I've seen you do corset stuff, so now I want you to do more corset stuff. And a lot of producers don't have the creativity to go, hey, this woman that's done a lot of corset stuff, let's make her a badass secret agent.
Right.
I was kind of like, hey, you're a great actress. Like, let's work to, we have an opportunity to do something. Let's do it.
It's like the work together, like the rising tide raises all ships kind of mentality. Right. It's like if everybody can win along the way, then it's just.
But even that, now you've got her, she's in a role where she's like, great, I'm getting offers.
Yeah.
Because of people able to see me in this role now, which I didn't make any money doing, but now I made all this other money and had all this other success off of that. And so I think like that's, for actors, otherwise they're going to pigeonhole you. They're going to make you the corset person. Or
everybody's collectively investing in themselves in a way.
And as a filmmaker, you can often target actors that are pigeonholed in that way and say, hey, would you like to come and do this? I'm not going to pay you as much. I can't afford it, but I'm going to offer you something that nobody else is offering you.
Totally.
Because everybody's offering you the same role that you've been offered already.
Yeah.
So it's things like that to think about.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
This has been great. You have any parting words of wisdom?
Well, isn't that the whole podcast that we've just been talking about?
Hey,
the words of wisdom?
Fair enough.
No, I mean, I think that, I think that, like, to your point, like the filmmaking has become so much easier.
Yeah.
Like, the equipment's so much cheaper. So many more people are doing it. But fundamentally, I think what it comes back to is storytelling. And you got to really focus on the storytelling. It's the thing that I go through, and it's weird because I've become, I've had to do so much learning about like Facebook ads, right, with this course because I don't have a company. It's just me. But I've had to learn how to do Facebook ads because otherwise nobody knows about the course. Sure. And there's a lot of parallels. And in Facebook ads, when they talk a lot about Facebook ads is, we could teach you how to like set up your ads and run things and campaigns and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that's going to sell the course or sell your product is the message. Like that's where you should. So people come in, they go, how do I do Facebook ads? And you're like, well, you got to go back to 5 lessons ago where we talked about the messaging. Right. That's 90% of it. Yeah. So in the same way, with filmmaking, it's the script. Yeah. It's the story you're telling. That is where you should be putting the most work. It's not about whether you shoot on a red. It's not about what lenses you use. I mean, that's all fun. But like I made Layover on a Canon 5D Mark II with one lens, the 24-105. That's how we shot the entire movie. But people just clicked with the story. And it's weird to me that people click with the story because on paper it shouldn't work, Yeah. And so I think that when you can focus on the story, it puts less pressure on you to make it the production value of it all, visuals of it all. Yeah. And by the way, if you have a shitty story, production
doesn't matter.
It's not going to matter. It's not going to help you.
Yeah.
So I think we've gotten away from story and I think the more people focus on that within whatever genre you want to explore, it's going to make things infinitely easier for you, as you go through that process.
Right on, man. Well, I'm going to let you go. Where can people find you online?
The best place is probably Instagram at Joshua Caldwell Director. Everything sort of, spools out from there. Yeah. Or you can go to joshua-caldwell.com for my website. And if you're interested in the course, visit 6kfilmmaker.com.
Cool. Right on. Josh, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, loved it.
Appreciate it. Cool. All right, folks, that was my interview with Josh Caldwell. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll link to everything of his in the show notes. I'll also drop a link to The Obstacle is the Way as well, if you're interested in reading that. As always, a 5-star review on iTunes, on Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts is super helpful. And if you're watching on YouTube, a thumbs up or subscribe really helps us out as well. You can learn more about this show at nosetpath.com or nosetpath on Instagram. You can learn more about me, your host, Drew English, at drewenglish.com or on Instagram at Drew English with an extra H at the end. And then also be sure to check out my creative studio and consultancy, Lights and Years Media. You can find that on Instagram at Lights and Years. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.